Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to continue on with reassembly of the Suzuki TS50 gaucho project. Last video we installed the oil pump on the engine, which is just above the shot here. This video, what we're going to do, as you can probably tell from what I've got set up here for props, is the chain and drive sprocket, which you can see all laid out here. Everything in the shot right now is new from Suzuki or aftermarket, with the exception of that little bushing right there. See, I'm pointing to it. It's on the box for the chain that goes on behind the sprocket on the countershaft sprocket shaft. And I'll come back to some of that in a minute. Everything else here is new. The sprocket, the lock washer, little tiny O-ring right here that goes behind the bushing. Again, I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. And a new nut. The lock washer is one of those types that you got to bend the tab over. The chain is, as you can see, an RK. It's a very well-known brand of Japanese chain, though I think this one's made in Malaysia or somewhere else, but it's a Japanese company. This is just a standard chain. For a project like this, an O-ring or a high-quality chain isn't necessary in my opinion. That type of chain wasn't used originally on this bike when it was new from the factory, so I'm going to install a new chain that is equivalent to what originally would have been installed on this bike when it was new. The nut right here that holds the sprocket assembly on, I haven't been able to find a torque setting for that. I went through my service manual, the Suzuki service manual. I could find nothing related to torque for the countershaft sprocket nut. I could find a lot of other torque settings, but not that one. So I'm just going to use my discretion, and I'll snug it up good and tight, and then of course I'll bend over the lock washer to hold the sprocket assembly in place. The chain, and I believe if I remember right, that's a 110, I think, link chain, if I recall. Let's take a look at that. It's a 112. I was close. It's been a while since I ordered that. That's supposed to be the right size for this bike, so I should not have to break that chain. Yeah, obviously you can see it's a number 420. That's the pitch of the chain. There are different pitches if you're not aware of that. Different sizes of chains. They're not all the same. But I should not have to really do much adjusting of the chain except for pulling the wheel all the way forward when I put the chain on, assemble the chain on, and then I'll adjust the rear wheel back and align the rear wheel and tighten up the axle nuts, etc. But we're going to start with installing these pieces here on the countershaft from the bike, from the transmission output shaft, and then we'll move on to getting the chain in place. We're ready now to put the countershaft sprocket back on, but before I get to that, I do want to make a comment. You might notice from time to time a hum in the background. That is the circulator pump for the radiant heat in the shop. It was quite cold last night. We're well into the autumn season now, so we're at that time of year where we'll have a warm stretch where it'll be very warm shirt sleeve weather, and then a couple of days later it'll be very cold and windy as the weather starting to transition more towards winter. Last night it was around here, it was around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what, about 10 degrees C or so, and it's really windy today, so you might hear a little creaking and groaning of the building as the wind gusts off of Lake Michigan. And the circulator for the heat might cut in from time to time. Well, that said, let's get on with this. First thing I need to install is this little tiny O-ring you can see right there. And that O-ring goes back here inside of this seal over this output shaft. This is an interesting part. It is still available from Suzuki and is used on a lot of different Suzuki models. If you look at some of the earlier models, their parts diagrams, it doesn't call this O-ring out. Later models, obviously it does. This bike, it does call it out. The other thing that's interesting about this, and I believe it was probably added, an engineering change somewhere along the way, because they were having a problem with leakage of oil past the seal, so they added this little tiny O-ring. The other thing that's interesting is in some diagrams it shows that inside of this bushing right here, goes over this shaft and inside of that, the lips of that seal. Some of them show this O-ring on the inside of this bushing like that. Some of them show it on the outside of the bushing like that. Personally, I think one of those is a mistake, and I think it's the one with the O-ring on the outside. I don't think that is the way it is supposed to be. I think this goes on the inside, and that's where most of the diagrams that I've seen show the O-ring on the inside of this bushing right here. And that's just a spacer, really, is what that is, to space the drive sprocket out the appropriate distance. And I think this bushing pushes against the O-ring and seals it up in there when you put the nut on. I've already got this little O-ring all lubricated up with silicone grease. You know, my favorite, the dielectric grease right here. We've talked about that over and over, so that's already been pre-lubricated just to ease its transition into that seal. So what I'm going to do is get it started like that. And then I've got a clean screwdriver, and I'm just going to poke it in like that, real carefully. I went back at my photos that I took when I broke down the bike, and I couldn't find any photos of this to reference from the disassembly. I don't know whether I didn't take them of the sprocket or not. I just don't recall. So I got the O-ring started in there comfortably. I'm going to put a little dielectric grease on this bushing. This is the original spacer or bushing that came out of this assembly. I'm just going to wipe it really good. And then we're going to slip this in like this. There. You felt that slip right in. And again, that pushes that O-ring, I believe, back up against, well, whatever's back in there for the seal. Here's a new lock washer, of course. And then we have a new nut right there. First thing we're going to put on, of course, is the new drive sprocket. This is a 15-tooth 420. This is the size that came originally. That is 15-tooth is the size that came originally on this bike. So the sprocket goes on, then the washer, and then the nut. Now, as I indicated earlier, I can't find a torque spec for this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten this nut up with a big socket. That's actually a 24 millimeter socket, or nut I should say. And my 24 millimeter is 1/2 inch drive, hence the very large wrench. A couple ways you can hold this sprocket from turning. The bike is in neutral, the engine's in neutral, as you can see right here. There's a couple of ways you can secure this. You can wedge a piece of wood in here. I don't know if I got any wood here right now. You can wedge a piece of wood in here. You can put the chain on and then just use the weight of the bike to prevent this from turning. I'm not going to get crazy with over tightening this. I don't think it needs to be over tightened. I'll snug it up really good. I'm going to put the chain on first, and then I'll come back and tighten the chain or tighten the nut, and then I'll bend one of these flats over to prevent this nut from coming off. So let me reposition the camera, and we'll see if we can get back to a wider perspective so you can see the countershaft sprocket and the rear sprocket at the same time. The chain I've taken out of the package, and I cleaned all the manufacturing grease, packing grease that they coat these chains with when they make them before they ship them, keep them from rusting in transit. I removed that grease because it's very thick and it tends to attract dust and dirt and debris, and I just don't want that. So right now the chain is dry. I will later on, once I probably I'm wrapping up the project. One of the final things I will do is lubricate the chain. But for now, it's dry, it's clean and it's dry, and that's the way I want it for what I'm going to do now. So to put this chain on, you know, it's pretty elementary, really. I usually start at the rear. I prefer to have the master link end up down in here somewhere where I can get at it easily. So I just will position the chain, and I fully expect it to be quite loose initially here, because I got the rear wheel all the way forward, like I said. And it's getting pretty close to where I want it. There we go, like that. Now I will, sometimes there's space here between the shifter and the sprocket, sometimes there isn't, like on this one, so I'm just going to put it on and rotate it like that. Then pull the chain around, and you can see how loose it is right now. So master link and plate. A little grease left over there. And I'm going to leave this loose for now, like this, or rather I should say I'm not going to put on the clip, because I want to adjust the wheel back and make sure I don't run out of adjustment. That's an awful loose chain. I would expect it to be something like that. So I'm going to pull this chain back with the adjusters. I might end up breaking this before it's over because it seems way too long to me, but we'll see. Well, I had a discovery with this chain. I went back and checked all the reference materials I have on the chain size for this bike, and every one of them called out 112 links. So I thought, that's odd, because that's what I ordered. That's what this is. So I went and pulled the original chain I took off the bike out of the parts bin and counted the links, and it's 108. So what I did is I've positioned the axle pretty much all the way forward to the very first alignment mark. And then since this is a 12, if you count back 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that means the chain would go, I don't know if you can see that, about right there. And that gives me plenty of room to adjust the chain for the wheel back. So I do think 108 is the appropriate length, which means I have to remove 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll remove it back to here so that the master link right here can fit in like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove or break this chain and remove 4 of these links. I'm going to do that off camera. I'm just going to take I'll take the chain off, take it over to the vise, take my Dremel and just grind off, you know, one of these peened over heads, tap it through with a punch. Very easy to do. It's about a 2-minute job. And so I've got the links removed. You can see right there where I've ground that down with this Dremel wheel. Took less than 5 minutes total. So I ground that down, and then I just took this punch. You can see the end there, I think. And I took this punch and I just drove the pin out, and it dropped out, and voila, here we are. So I'm expecting this chain will be about the right length now to begin the process of adjustment. So we'll go ahead and put this on, and there you go. That's about what I would have expected from this chain originally, given the position of the rear wheel, which is pretty much all the way forward. I don't know what went wrong in my research. I've checked just this morning, a few minutes ago, verified it. Everything I can find says 112 links is what you're supposed to have on this bike. Clearly that's not correct. I went and pulled out the original chain, and it was 108 links. So that's why I removed the 4, of course. And I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. My mistake was not verifying with the original chain. I should have done that, and I didn't. So now we can go ahead and put the side plate on like that, and then we're going to install the clip Now again, the chain, as we're looking at this side of the bike, the chain runs counterclockwise like this. So the clip needs to be installed with the closed end right here and facing the direction of travel like that. You don't want to install it like this where the open end is facing the direction of travel. You typically don't do it that way. You don't want the chain or the clip potentially coming off. I'm going to take a pair of needle nose and see if I can't snap that pin into place like that. Again, the closed end here faces the direction of travel. You don't want to take a chance on that popping open and losing your chain, obviously, for some reason. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to adjust the chain back. I have not tightened the motor mounts up yet, by the way. I will do that eventually here, but right now I'm going to get the chain in the approximate right position. I'm not going to tighten everything down completely because I'm going to probably have to make some adjustments as we go, but I'm going to tighten the bolts right here and just pull that back a little bit and then snug this down, and then I can go ahead and tighten the sprocket here, nut right here on the chain about where I want it in terms of adjustment. Again, I don't typically snug everything up or tighten everything up all at once because I might have to make minor adjustments as we go, but it's in a relative correct position right now. You can see I got a piece of wood wedged in here to prevent the sprocket from turning, as well as, of course, the weight of the bike will prevent things from turning. So I'm just going to snug this large 24 millimeter nut up. Not going to overdo it. I just want to make sure that she's good and snug. Like that. Now that I've got this snug, I'm going to take a cold chisel. I've just barely started it. You can see there. It's a nice sharp cold chisel. It's flat on the back, tapered on the front. Just going to get it underneath that tab with a brass mallet. And we've got that all bent over, and that prevents this nut from backing off. So I'm satisfied with the way that came out. A little bit of a diversion there, a little detour with shortening of the chain, but we're pretty much where I wanted to be. I think now what I'm going to move on to next is, I think I'm going to put the stator assembly in here on the engine. I'm going to have to work on the wiring a little bit and probably have to re-sleeve it. And in fact, there it is right there. I already got it out. I haven't done anything with it yet. It needs to be cleaned. Again, I probably will re-sleeve it. Check out this rubber grommet. This grommet fits right up in here. But I think that's probably going to be next. So that's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.